Welcome back to Go Bucks. Here with three special guests, myself as usual, Matt as usual, and we have Brian Weaver and Jason Johannes. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, everyone is they're representing. I don't know if you've seen any of the other videos when Matt was on. He was wearing maybe like an American Eagle shirt. He was one day wearing Penn State colors. And this is a channel about our teams. And I just want to point out, I want to count the number of pieces of flair we've got going on right here. And let's just see who wins. The Buckeyes
Nate thinks that somehow all the extra flair is going to make up for his team losing every single year.
That's right.
Well, you gotta win in some category because it's not going to be on the football field, Nate.
Hey, you know what? I've done the math, and I'm good at math. I've counted that Michigan wins once per decade. So
where are we at this decade?
It's 2021. We've got the whole decade to win our game.
That's the stuff that rivalries are made of right there.
But if you win now, then you go the rest of the decade. We're at the beginning of the decade. It's going to be a long, lonely decade for you, Nate.
We have a lot of time. We can meet our average no problem. I guarantee it. We've got a lot of time.
What's Michigan averaging? Like 3 losses a year now? I mean, where are we at?
Yeah, we're back to like when Lloyd Carr was at first, prior to 1997. He was losing about 3 games per year.
By the way, Nate, have you kept up on what Brady Hoke is doing at San Diego State?
He's tearing it up over there. He's ranked.
Doesn't everybody
do better?
Ranked
at Michigan.
Well, every coach does better when they leave Michigan.
Usually do much better when they head out too. Remember, was it Stephen 3? He did great over at
Stephen 3.
Yeah, I think the greatest punter in the history of football too, man. You guys seen Matareza? Have you seen that kid?
No.
Moving like 80-yard punts. He's unbelievable. Left-footed. He's a bad mofo. Oh, he's unbelievable. He should be in the Heisman discussion.
I wish
I'm serious. He's badass.
Heisman punter.
Let's jump into this. So let's start out with this past weekend's games. Brian, we'll start with you as far as that. Like the Buckeyes had a real big game against Michigan State. It was supposed to be like, it was game day. Like I felt the energy. Take us through what your thoughts are on what happened.
I mean, that thing was done at halftime. It's 49-0.
It was done the first quarter. It was 21-0.
It was unbelievable. Like it was almost like when we knew Michigan State's defense was not that, had issues with their pass defense, but that was almost like routes on air. Like it was so easy for Ohio State. And they did whatever they wanted. They took whatever they wanted. And before you blinked, I mean, Michigan State, Ohio State scores on the first drive. Michigan State has to punt. Ohio State scores again. You get the turnover. You're just done. Like you get behind a team that's that explosive. And what's crazy about them is they're finally hitting their stride, I think, with their run schemes, their run fits. And now they're showing that if you're going to play, no matter what you do, you're going to be wrong. If you play to take away the deep stuff and you play off them, they're just going to screen you to death, or they're going to run on you, or they're going to go over the top. But it's not always just a big play down the field. Sometimes it's a short pass. It's you go back to some of the stuff that these guys are capable of on short passes, a 7-yard hitch, an 11-yard pass, and they're gone. You miss a tackle, 70-yard touchdown. You miss Travion Henderson, 1 gap, touchdown. And that's the thing. Like, how many teams in the country can put a 28-point quarter on you? And Ohio State does it, when they get these big games like this, they're doing it every game. So it's got to be scary. And it's not like they did this. It's not that we all knew Michigan State wasn't a top, their ranking, they're obviously overrated for their ranking. But that's a good team. It's not like you're doing this against, Georgia State or something like that, Charleston Southern. You're doing this against Michigan State in a game that they knew mattered to them too. It was a measuring stick game for them, and Ohio State just obliterated them.
Yeah, they did. And what you said is like they have been doing that to teams. They'll get up 28 points in the first quarter, but they weren't supposed to do that against the number 7 ranked team in the country. And I think that's kind of like where the big surprise came in. And since you're wearing green, Jason, what?
Not Michigan State, though. Not Michigan State.
I want to know, I need to know why that happened. When you watch that game, like, what do you think was the reason? Like, did they just have a hiccup, which is a bad game for Michigan State? Because they played better.
I think Ohio State, like what Brian said, they've seemed to hit a stride the last couple of weeks, particularly after Nebraska, where they struggled quite a bit. the offense the last couple of weeks since that game has been extremely dominating. It's been the quick scores, deep passes, runs, and I think what happened is Michigan State came in and Ohio State punched them in the mouth about 3 different times in the first quarter, and I think they just yielded pretty much. You know, they were trying, but I think their inspiration was just beat out of them, like, mentally at that point. You could just see, you talked about feeling it, Nate, like on that, you could feel it through the TV that after those first 3 scores in that first quarter, man, it was just Michigan State was done.
Yeah, totally. And I saw, I think it was on the Michigan podcast on YouTube I watched. It's a Michigan guy, but he was talking about how every single team that's played the Spartans, every quarterback that's played the Spartans has had their career game. And I can't tell. I mean,
wow.
Stroud may have actually had his career game in this one. I don't know. He may have had another one in the past, but was that a career game for him total? Because I think that.
Well, I know he did set a all-time Ohio State record with 17 completions in a row. So
yeah,
he was setting historic records.
It was a good game.
Hey, by the way,
it was a good game for Stroud.
How weird was that? How weird was that 18th play? I still don't know what the hell happened on that, but he threw it. It looked like he put it in the right place. He had Wilson and Olave in the same spot, and Wilson kind of pulls up like almost like he hit the defender and didn't want to get called for offensive PI, and the ball just drops right between the two of them.
Huh.
But I mean, he was so on point. It was ridiculous in that first half. And I was kind of saying to some folks before that game that I really felt like that was going to be the Stroud Heisman game. Like he was going to put himself squarely in contention for the Heisman, because like you said, Nate, everybody, like, there were 4 or 5 quarterbacks in a row that had thrown for ridiculous numbers against Michigan State. So you knew it was a bad matchup. But the biggest thing I think is that Kenneth Walker was coming in with Heisman aspirations of his own. He'd come off a 5 touchdown performance against Michigan. And, they came into that game and Thorne, you heard all this stuff at the beginning of the season about how explosive Michigan State's offense was and how they were able to be balanced and Thorne was playing at a pretty high level. And man, I mean, they just got the doors completely blown off in that game. Nothing they did. Walker's nowhere near Heisman contention after that game. And you have to give credit not only to the improvement that we've seen on the offensive side, but the improvement from the Oregon game to now on the defensive side. And I'm not saying that this is an elite defense, but what Matt Barnes and that staff have done with that defense as they've settled into roles, I mean, they are playing at a very high level at the wrong time for teams like Michigan and whoever they face, potentially in the big championship and whoever they would face in the playoff. I mean, this is optimal timing for Ohio State.
Hey, plus, did they pull Kerry Combs from running the defense back there or what? What happened?
Did they what?
Pull Kerry Combs from running some of the defense?
Yeah, he stopped after the second game. He got demoted. Now he's just up in the press box helping out there. But I mean, his forte is always
getting coffee.
His forte has always been
whatever he's doing now. It's working because it wasn't before.
He's an excellent recruiter, and he's also really good with the corners, who are the only people on the defense that are always good when he's here.
Interesting. Well, so as far as that game goes, what does that mean? Like Brian, you kind of touched on it. Like the Ohio State is kind of coming into their own. They're topping out. Do you see any chance that they may have topped out a little early? Meaning, these games,
the last few weeks
they're
of the
peaking
year.
at the right time.
These are
the perfect time.
But
it's the opposite of what John
Palmer
used to do.
How old she is,
Hey, Brian, excellent handling of that pussy right there.
Very good. Well done. Well done.
I was gonna say she's so old that she was named after Carson Palmer.
Yeah, the guy wearing the Notre Dame / Michigan State jersey comes through. I love it.
There you go. So Nate, you asked me about peaking too early. I don't think so. I mean, I think that's what Ryan Day was talking about in the post-game press conference was that, they just got to keep, they got to not listen to the outside noise. And the biggest thing I think for them is that they were having some issues in their run fits. I think that was one of the biggest issues they had against teams like Penn State and Nebraska in particular. They were not hitting on their bread and butter run plays. And now they found some tweaks and some things that they're doing with personnel. Mainly one of the things I've seen them do is they're playing with a lot more 2 tight end sets. and they're doing some different things with motioning the tight end that give the defenses a ton of problems. So they do a lot of late shifts, and it causes problems for the defense. And when you couple that with the level that CJ Stroud is running these RPOs, they are running a ton of RPOs, and you just pick your poison. It's like, do you step up and try to plug those run gaps? Because if you're slow to react, Henderson in particular is going to bust a long one on you. Or, do you try to take away these receivers, and which one do you take away? And it's just, the one thing I think Michigan State didn't do that I think you have to do as a defense is you have to take away something. You can't sit back and just wait for Ohio State to passively, like you can't play scared of deep passes. You can't, because they'll just destroy you. And that's what they showed is, look, if you're going to sit back and try to play basically a prevent style defense on Ohio State, they're just going to pick you apart. They're happy to run and just grind drives, and then they're going to pop you eventually. You're going to make a mistake. And that was the one thing I think that we saw was Ohio State. They cleaned up their run fits. They got some scheme things that have really started to work in the run game, and they've avoided these pre-snap penalties and things, these dumb mistakes that were hurting them against teams like Penn State and Nebraska. So I think they're peaking at the optimal time, and it's got to be terrifying. I got to give a ton of credit to Michigan. They've had a great year. I think I give a lot of credit for Harbaugh for turning over that coaching staff. I think this is as good a team as Michigan's had in a long, long time. But this is the absolute wrong time to be catching Ohio State on the ascent.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think Harbaugh's best move is probably giving their linebacker coach to Ohio State.
You're
Are you
welcome.
saying the Ohio State linebackers are great?
Probably the worst linebacker play we've had ever at Ohio State. I can't remember worst linebacker play.
Is it recruits or scheme?
Well, I think
both. It's both.
Yeah, but part of it is too. Like,
a lot of bad players.
Ohio State put 4 linebackers in the pros in last year's draft. 4. So, and they're a 4-3 defense. So they put 4 dudes that are actually, that played significant amount of snaps. The senior guys behind them, hell, 3 of them barely. 2 of them aren't even really in the program anymore, and 1 of them barely plays. He plays special teams now. So Taraja Mitchell and Dallas Gant and Kayvon Pope, those dudes, 2 of those guys aren't even in the program anymore. So they were really struggling when they were playing Michigan. When they were playing Oregon, they were still struggling to figure out. It was a total grab bag on defense. They had all these guys running it, coming in the personnel groups, and they've settled in. And I will say it's a little scary when their best linebacker is a converted running back. But Michigan should have some really, really bad memories of converted Ohio State running backs playing linebacker.
We've got a lot of bad memories. I mean, we'd have to count those up.
In their defense, though, Steele Chambers was probably a higher recruited linebacker than he was a running back. He just came here because he wanted to get a chance to play running back first, and we were one of the few programs that agreed to that. But in general, he's it though. I mean, and while we have had a lot of people that were starting the last several years, so we have a bunch of guys that are new starters, but these aren't guys that have barely been here. I mean, a lot of those guys, people have been calling for them to start for 3 years in a row now. And like Taraja Mitchell, everyone's like, why isn't he starting? He has to be better than what we have on the field.
And now you see why.
And then finally, they're showing why they never got any playing time in the last few years, because they're all garbage.
Yeah,
I think that's fair.
So how does it work as far as, take me through the psychological, the psyche of the players now? So the Buckeyes,
the Michigan players, they're fun.
The Michigan players.
Family show.
But the Buckeyes just beat the number
Michigan
7 team.
They're screwed.
The Buckeyes just beat the number 7 team in the country, right?
A team
and
that they
throttled them. So what does that do for the next game? Do you think that's a benefit for Michigan?
How can they're going to be at peak confidence?
Awesome?
I mean, Nate, they're going to be at peak confidence right now. They took the number 7 team in the country.
But we're talking about college kids. I mean, the Buckeyes already have confidence. We're talking about college kids here getting over a little bit, like you saw it with Michigan State. They beat Michigan, huge game. This is a big game for Ohio State. I mean, they crushed them in the game, but with preparation, the
Is
emotion of the
Michigan really
game,
that big of a
Well,
game anymore? They haven't won in 20 years.
it sort of is now.
But
But
I
but
will
the
say
thi-
this. I think, Nate, to answer at least my part of that would be, I watched I watched the whole Michigan State game, and I've watched a fair amount of Michigan this year. Michigan was the better team. Michigan should have won that game. Michigan was dominating. If they get that defensive touchdown that was taken away in the replay, regardless of the call, momentum was swinging big time for Michigan in that game. Michigan had it, and they've had a bad habit of letting teams back in games in the second half.
Yep.
And I think that's the one thing. If I'm a Michigan coach, I'm telling my kids, like, look, we know that's a measuring stick game because it's a common opponent. And they just got done smoking Maryland. Well, so did Ohio State.
Everybody smokes
We were
Maryland.
ready to smoke. Yeah, but I mean, they were smoking Michigan State too. They could have, but they didn't keep the foot on the floor. And they let Michigan State get back in that, and they know that they were the better team. And that's one of the things that pisses me off, honestly. I wanted Michigan to win that game. I don't understand these, Ohio State fans that always root against Michigan. I wanted Michigan undefeated. I mean, think about this for a minute. Think about this for just 1 minute, okay? If Michigan would have sealed a deal against Michigan State, this game has a totally different narrative to it. Right now, it's a play-in game to the playoff. But if they had been undefeated, we would be talking about 2 Big Ten teams in the playoff right now. Michigan would have been undefeated coming in this game. And if they would have kept it, if they could keep it close against Ohio State, we might be talking about 2 Big Ten teams instead of 2 SEC teams. So
very true.
It worked out perfect for teams like UC that Michigan State beat them. But Michigan was the better team that day. I think the difference is, from the Ohio State standpoint, is Ohio State's clearly better than Michigan State. Like, didn't even give them a chance. And that's the difference in the two teams is Ohio State's got that ability and that mentality, I think, to just put you away and bury you. They learned their lesson from the Indiana game last year. They will Ryan Day will bury you. And I think Michigan's content to play with the lead and take care of the ball and try to grind out a win. And
trestle ball. They're doing trestle ball.
Yes, it is. It's trestle ball. It's exactly what it is. Sometimes you just got to bury teams.
Yep, very true. And I think maybe towards the end of this video, we will all give we'll go around, we'll give our predictions for next weekend for the game. We'll also want to talk about kind of like what we see I almost called it the BCS, the college football rankings coming up. But I guess just to finish this off, what I was thinking really was these players for Ohio State. Like, if I'm an 18 to 22-year-old kid playing for Ohio State, your confidence is pretty high. You just beat the team. You just beat the team that beat Michigan, your opponent coming up this weekend. That logic goes through your head, and we just crushed them, which means the Kevin Bacon game of football, we're going to crush Michigan. And that very well may happen, of course. So I think, and if we want to segue into kind of how we see this game coming up between Michigan and Ohio State, I think the best we can actually hope for on the Michigan end is that we get the Penn State type of game. The Penn State happened to Ohio State, where it was I think they won by 9, like 3 field goals. The Nebraska type of game, where it was kind of ugly. And again, they won by 3 field goals. The Buckeyes did. I think that's kind of what Michigan's hoping for. If it turns into the game that we saw against Michigan State, it's done at halftime.
Yeah, well, I think if Ohio State does a couple of quick scores like they put on Michigan State, Michigan's going to fold too, because 2 things. 1, Ohio State feels very indestructible right now, or invincible. Mm-hmm. They got to be. 2, I don't think they're that scared. They're not scared of Michigan. They're not scared of those guys. They beat them repeatedly for years and years. Exactly, right? And I think Michigan, from a psychological standpoint, like you're talking, like you're asking Ohio State, I think for Michigan, they're afraid of Ohio State because they haven't consistently beat Ohio State forever. They saw these beatdowns that probably happened. You go up 14-0 on them, 21-7, couple quick scores. I don't know if Michigan recovers.
Oh no, and they don't. But I think from my standpoint, Ohio State crushing Michigan State the way they did at home, that's exactly what I wanted. From just a psychological strategic standpoint, that's exactly what I wanted to happen, because I want the Buckeyes coming into that game overconfident so that Michigan can maybe surprise them and create that Penn State Nebraska game. maybe like make it ugly. That's really all we're kind of open.
So what's
your
the
guys'
biggest
thoughts?
hope for Michigan then, Nate? That Ohio State's overconfident? I mean, what's the real shot?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what's the game plan against them?
100%. Yeah. I think I started out this year after Michigan started doing well. I said, you know what? I don't think that Ohio State may not blow us out this year. That would actually be a win for Michigan. I mean, as sad as it is to say, if it was a close game, if we had
You want
a
moral victories? That's
game,
where your program
yes,
is. You want moral victories.
We win
sad.
one game per decade, Jason. One game per decade. So if this is a stepping stone to that one win we're going to get in the 2020s, then that's kind of where we are right now. I mean, Michigan has to face it. They don't recruit as well. They're not as talented.
No.
The best thing you can do. Yeah.
Well, nobody in the conference recruits like that. And that's the thing when you look at what's going on around college football. I mean, that was when Georgia just boat raced Florida and Kirby Smart had
and got their coach
about,
fired. He
well,
just got fired
talking
today.
about like, hey, recruiting, like, and that's because he wasn't recruiting. Like, recruiting's not a priority. And if you're not recruiting at the highest level, you can't win. You can't win. You can't really entertain the playoffs and playing for a national title if you're not recruiting at a high level. And right now, Ohio State has more 5-stars on their team alone than the whole conference has. And I think it's by a margin of probably at least a factor of 2 or 3.
Jeez.
Like, they're the only program in the North that's recruiting on the level of some of these programs in the South. And that's the bread and butter. I mean, it's just night and day. And that's the difference is, Ohio State's recruiting the dude who takes the 7-yard hitch and goes 70 yards. Michigan's not doing that. Like, that's the difference. You got to grind when you're Michigan. You got to scheme when you're Michigan, and you got to pray that you catch them on the right day. And I do think one thing I've been saying about Michigan all year that I really, really like is that they have an identity. They know what they want to do. And for a long time, they haven't had that. And they're a team that they have an identity and they can do it. They can impose their will. They want to grind you down. They want to be physical with you. They want to dominate you at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And they want to be tougher than you. And they'll bring 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends, whatever packages they have to. They're happy with a game that's trestle ball, that's played in the 20s. They're happy with that. If they can dominate, they're happy to have a game like that Penn State game. The difference there is I think that the perfect game plan is the Oregon game plan, which was Oregon dominated Ohio State at the line of scrimmage in the run game. And they were 5 for 5 or 4 for 4 because they had the one long touchdown. They were 4 for 4 when they got in the red zone. They scored touchdowns. That is the key to the whole thing. You have to, when Ohio State, when you have the ball, you have to get physical with them. And I think you potentially can. That is the one limitation with Ohio State. They got a bunch of really, really good dudes, but they really want to play with 3 safeties. They play with this 4-2-5 all year. Ronnie Hickman is basically playing as the weak side linebacker. They want to play with more versatile personnel. If you can stay in 2 and 3 tight ends and just pound the crap out of the ball against Ohio State, you can potentially beat them. And then on defense, the thing that Nebraska did well and Penn State did really well is they're moving dudes around, they're scheming. They've got some things that Ohio State hasn't necessarily seen before. They created confusion on the offensive line, and they stymied them when they got in. Ohio State's going to move the ball, but if Ohio State's effective in the red zone, you're done. You're just done. Like, if you're giving up touchdowns, you're toast.
Totally. And it sounds like
the game plan. It's no secret.
It kind of sounds like what you're saying is, you remember that game with the New York Giants and the Patriots when the Patriots had Randy Moss. And they were going to be 16-0, or I think they were. They were basically going to win the Super Bowl and go undefeated. Like, what they did, if I'm remembering right, the announcers and everything, they rushed 4 and they got pressure on Brady with 4. And they were able to do that the whole game. And then they were able to actually get that pressure. I don't know. I mean, that's something you kind of have to do.
When you got Jason Pierre-Paul and Michael Strahan, that's exactly what you want to do with Hutchinson and some of the guys they've got on the defensive line. They want to be able to put pressure. If they can't put pressure with their dudes, if their dudes don't outplay Ohio State's dudes, you have no chance. Like Karlaftis for Purdue, who was getting all that hype as a first-round dude, he did nothing in that game against Ohio State.
Yeah.
Now, granted, he doesn't have the surrounding talent, I think Michigan has the best overall talent that they're going to face. But, Penn State, I think the biggest thing they've done is they schemed some things. They created some confusion, because the one thing with Ohio State is they've got a really good offensive line, but there are a bunch of guys that haven't played a bunch of games together. And with an offensive line play, it's coordinated. You got to know what you're doing. You got to know what your responsibility is and the guy next to you. When you see a particular guy in a particular gap, you got to know, is that my guy or is that your guy? And there was some miscommunication in those games. What would concern me as a defensive coordinator going against Ohio State right now is it looks like Ohio State's cleaned up a lot of that. And that's terrifying. If they've cleaned up some of those responsibilities and you can't create that confusion, dude, they're massive. Like their offensive line is absolutely massive. So you're not going to stand there down after down, play after play, quarter after quarter, and match up with them. You're just not. They're huge.
Yeah.
I think also a lot of it has to do with specific matchups. And like with Oregon, they had really good secondary. So while our receivers are ultimately still better, they were just good enough to slow us down a little bit. And so Michigan is basically controlling a lot of the people that they're facing this year, because Hutchinson and Ajabo were both just on fire. But the problem is, even though that's a strength of their team, our strength is our tackles. And we have two guys that are going to probably go in the first round at tackle, and then another first rounder at tackle who's at guard. And then another guard who's going to probably be a first rounder. So like our entire line is outside of our center, really. So like the only weakness potentially is if we go up against someone who has elite defensive tackle play like Alabama or Georgia. And unfortunately, Michigan, while they have talented defensive ends, they don't have the tackles that I think we can really take advantage of our only semi-weakness on our line.
And speaking of that, recruiting, Michigan has actually done really well recruiting defensive tackle, but they've been busts. We've got a 5-star guy on our defensive line right now at tackle. You'd never know it. You'd never know he was.
Is that coaching or just bad pick?
I don't know, because I kind of feel like if you're a superstar 5-star player, you're going to play like it. If you're going to play like it, you can't hold talent back. I mean, even Rich Rod couldn't hold Brandon Graham down. I mean, look at his
some
defense.
of that stuff I think is projection.
Some of it is.
I mean, some of the times they're looking at guys and they're going, all right, you can't coach whatever it is, 6'3", 330. You can't coach that. Like that moves. But the guy might not have it between the ears. He might not have the work ethic. He might not have look at Christian Barmore. Like Christian Barmore for Alabama, that dude committed to Temple. Like he was out of Philadelphia as a 3-star. He turned into like the best defensive tackle in football last year. Sometimes it's those guys that just, and other times it's like, yeah, obviously, the Boses are the Boses, young is young. So like there are dudes who are just dudes, and there are other dudes but there are plenty of 5-stars that flame out. It's hard. It's really hard to get those war daddies out of the South. They hardly ever come north, especially if they're out of like Georgia, Florida, Texas, wherever. And the big defensive, that's what's really, I think, one of the coolest things to watch with Ohio State is, especially on the defensive side, they had to play a bunch of young guys early. And there are dudes now that are true freshmen that are in the 2 deep and play a bunch of snaps. And I'm not just talking about like JT and Jack Sawyer. I'm talking about like, Tyleek Williams. That dude's a 330-pound dude out of North Carolina that came to Ohio State. And he I think he still leads the team in sacks.
Yeah, he's my favorite player on the team.
Oh, he's awesome. He's played great. I mean, that's to the depth. That's the thing. Like, most teams, you might have a dude here or there, but the guy behind him is not nearly as good. It's just, with Ohio State, it's just wave after wave after wave of dudes. Now, there are positions they're not that great at. I think, Matt talked about linebacker has been a little sketchy. I think safety's been sketchy ever since Proctor got hurt. There are some issues there that can be exploited, but at the same time, Ohio State also recruits a kid like Denzel Burke, who is going to be a first-round corner. He's playing as he started as a true freshman. And he's the guy, like, schematically, they basically put him on an island and say, all right, everything else can work zone or man off of that. But Denzel Burke's going to take your best dude, and he's playing man-to-man. So if you want, you can try to make a living throwing fades, but it's not a winning business model. And that's what teams like Michigan State tried it, like Purdue tried it. I mean, yeah, David Bell had a bunch of yards. He didn't have a 200-yard game and a couple touchdowns against Ohio State. Denzel Burke took him out. And they'll give up hitches all day long, but they're not going to give up the big stuff because you're just not going to win throwing against that dude. And so that's yeah.
Speaking of Burke, is he hurt? Or is he going to
No,
be
he's
okay?
fine.
Okay,
Yeah, I think
because
he'll be
I did
all right.
see
I
a spot when he left the game. I didn't. No,
Yeah,
I think the
I'm
biggest
glad you
thing with
guys
that-
watched. I'm glad you guys watched that game against Michigan State, because at 28, that's when I went out and raked the yard,
Yeah.
because I was done at that point. 28-0. I don't need to watch.
Yeah, I stopped the
I'll
halftime.
watch the highlights. But yeah, I did see Burke go out, and I don't ever want to see a guy go out.
During that play, actually, he forced the fumble on the guy, and they called it an incomplete pass somehow.
Yeah.
So even though we
That was a
destroyed them,
terrible-
I did
Yeah.
see that. That's right. Yeah. That it seems like that's happened to you guys before.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
I can't
that
remember.
Lots of
insane.
bad calls.
But hey, one thing, I don't know how you want to, I don't want to mess around with the format too much, Nate, but one of the things I did want to touch on was, one of the things that I think really lost Michigan, the Michigan State game, is really, really poor tackling.
Yeah.
And that is a concern. I'm not really impressed. As impressive as Michigan has been, I haven't been real impressed with their linebacker play in particular. Like those guys don't seem to tackle very well. And their safeties, when they're coming up, if you're in one-on-ones, you got to make those tackles, especially against a team like Ohio State. And if you miss tackles in this game, it is going to get ugly really fast. And that was really the deal. I mean, all of Walker's long runs were yards after contact.
It was. And it's a little smoke and mirrors, I think, with the Michigan defense. They've got the two defensive tackles, or the defensive ends, that are going to go in the top 10. I think Kuiper's top 10 now. They've got both of them in there. But kind of after that, it's not a lot of real talent that you can really see. I mean,
I
we've
thought
got
one of your
a
corners
good
was supposed to
safety.
be a top guy too.
Yeah, he doesn't play that way. We get the 5 stars every once in a while, but they end up not playing like 5 stars. And I know who you're talking about, and the name escapes me for some reason right now. He's a safety, but he plays a lot of corner because it's the way college football is right now. He plays a lot of corner, but gets beat a lot too. So I think you're right. There's a little bit of smoke and mirrors, and again, it's going to happen at the line of scrimmage in this game coming up this weekend. It's going to, if Ojabo and Hutchinson can get the pressure that they need, they might be able to make this game ugly. But you're right. Ohio State can't do what they started doing to Michigan State, and this is going to be a laugher real soon.
Who's stopping Olave, right, on Michigan?
What's that?
Who's going to stop Olave on Michigan?
Who's going to stop any of the receivers on Michigan? Seriously. I guess maybe that's a question. If I was going to choose to stop the run or stop the pass, I don't know what I would choose against Ohio State. I mean, I guess I would try and stop the run first, because that's devastating when a team just runs and is successful constantly. It's devastating with the pass too, but to me, it's even more devastating when a team runs on you, like Walker did, 200 yards and 5 touchdowns. I mean, looking back at your team, if you were going to play Ohio State, what would you guys want to stop? If you were going to pick something, and not be greedy and say, oh, we're going to try and stop everything.
I'll let the other guys go first. I'm interested in hearing what they have to say. I've had some thoughts. I definitely have some thoughts of my own on this, but I'm
going with the passing game, because they score so fast on deep stuff all the time. I just think that breaks you down too much, from a mental aspect. I try to stop the pass.
Well, I don't think our run game actually hasn't been as dominant lately. We've had problems running against Penn State. We had problems running against Nebraska. We ran well. It seems like our backups are almost running better than Henderson lately. And not that he's playing bad. He just hasn't getting a lot of opportunities because we're going up big and then he's sitting on the bench. But so it just depends on it. Ryan Day right now is just focusing so much on the pass that what I would try to do is, since it seems like we're really doing a good job of spreading the ball around, I think that maybe it might mess with CJ Stroud or Ryan Day if you just try to really just take one receiver out and just make them, I mean, obviously they have 2 other great receivers, but if just try to take out one guy and at least make it a little bit harder. So you just double one guy, maybe switch that up. And I also think, you can't be blitzing every play, because Michigan State was trying that and you saw what happened. But, if they could get some effective blitzes, maybe, if they can somehow get some pressure with extra blitzes up the middle or something, because our line in the middle occasionally can give up some pressures. Although, like, I mean, really, I think he's only been sacked like 8 times all year, so it's going to be tough for them to try to do that. So it's just, you know, just not a lot of weaknesses to exploit on our offense. I mean, really, honestly, the only thing that they can really do is control the game on offense on their end, and hope that we have a few, you know, punts or something early on where they can maybe get a lead, and then, you know, they just have to control the ball. Like, that's what Michigan State's game plan
Like grind the
should have
clock down, like just
Yeah,
play
I mean,
possession
that's
ball.
the only thing. They have to be able to run the clock. Really, the offense is the key to their offense is the key to slowing our offense down. They have to be able to control the ball. If they can't control the ball at all on offense, and they're not going to have a chance at anything. And, you know, Michigan State abandoned the run way too soon, even though we were getting scores quickly. You have to, you know, one of the best running backs in the country, you have to give him the ball more than 6 times.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and say we are not going to use the Michigan State strategy on stopping Ohio State.
Because it
I'm
didn't
just
work,
going to go
whatever
out
it
on a
was,
limb
didn't
and say
work.
that. But I'll say this, though, and looking at Penn State, looking at Nebraska, they stopped Travion Henderson. They were able to stop him in the backfield, and that did something. And maybe they learned from that. Maybe the Buckeyes have kind of learned from that. But maybe I'm just being superstitious in that. But they stopped him, and they were able to have some success at stopping the Buckeyes. Kept them under 30 points both of those games. So I guess if I'm choosing, I'm probably going to follow that same format.
Well, it's interesting, Matt. I think I'm on the same page with you, because I think I feel more and more convinced that I'm doubling Chris Olave. Like, that is I'm just not. He's not going to be the one that's going to beat me. I don't care if Jackson Smith-Njigba has 15 catches or Wilson goes off. Like, you've got to stop something. And the number one thing I'm doing is I'm making sure there's a safety over the top of Olave, no matter where he is. You know where 2 is. And then, you know, the other thing, like that you said, I think is spot on, is Michigan's got to come out and be aggressive offensively. I think they've got to, like, their whole mantra in that this whole week has to be, we got to kick them in the head. You know, we got to come at them and be more physical with them from the jump. And that's if they're not as physical, if they don't match physicality, they know they can't match the talent level. But if they can match that, my dog's chewing his ball. So professional, right?
Is that Barron?
Yeah, it's Barron. So he, you know, they've got to control the flow of this game. And if they don't, there's no way, you know as well as I, that Michigan is not going to be able to throw. God, I'm making a point.
Not editing this out, by the way.
No, that's fine. Professional. It's his professionalism that I respect. So no, but I was just gonna say, I think they've got to impose their will, and part of that is, like, I'm going heavy. I'm bringing 2-3 tight ends. I'm gonna make Ohio State match us, and I'm gonna make them play action and stay disciplined, because they haven't shown that a lot of times, the discipline in that play action game. But defensively, the thing I liked about Penn State in particular, a lot of late shifts, like the defensive line shifting. There were a lot of communication problems between the tackles and the guards. And I think that's really key to trying to create that confusion. Because the one thing that I've seen and Matt touched on it a little bit, that the guards, you basically got tackles playing guard. So those guys aren't, you know, sometimes I like guards who are like borderline dirty players, you know, like, I'm going to hit you right up to the whistle and maybe a hair after, and they're going to come off the ball and hit people. Tackles are more like, I'm going to wait on you to initiate contact, and then I'm going to counter you. And that's what we have, a little bit of that. And then we also have a little bit of those guys just haven't played a lot together. So they're getting better, but there's still that tendency every once in a while to misread a stunt or a stem, something like that. So that's what I think you have to do, whether it's a combination of, you can't just all out pressure, because there's too much. Even if Stroud gets a half a second to get the ball out on a late crosser or something like that, and Day's so good. What I love about his offense, especially when you see the shot from behind the quarterback on the replays, look how many times when Stroud is throwing to a guy, if there's another guy late crossing into his vision, it's schemed up so well. Like, he gives Stroud so many options that it doesn't overwhelm this kid. I mean, he's only a first-year starter, but the structure of the offense is just done so well. And that's the problem, is, like, if you don't hit him, and no one's really hit him consistently. But if you can speed up his clock a little bit, where we've seen some of those, where some of these games where he's gotten his clock's a little sped up, he's not necessarily playing, he's not sharp. And if you can do that early in the game, then I think you've got a fighting chance. You do that and you control the tempo, I think you got a fighting chance.
Yeah, I like that. And you know what? You were talking about, I think, just kind of learning from all that, the losses. Like Ohio State, it was bad that they lost to Oregon. Good, it was a good thing that they did it early, but they learned a heck of a lot from that game. And same thing with Michigan. When they lost to Michigan State, they're better. They're better now than they were when they played Michigan State. And so I think that actually both teams are kind of peaking right now. We don't need to really touch on the Maryland game because that wasn't a really big game.
Maryland doesn't really count. Everybody beats them.
You know, I mean, that's not something that Michigan was doing early on in the season, even against the teams that they should have done that to, like a Rutgers teams. You know, they're now doing that. So I'm really hoping that we get a good game this weekend. That's kind of really all I'm
has the most experience, Nate, in terms of like juniors, seniors? Is it Ohio State or Michigan? Who's got the most upperclassmen?
I would say, gosh, I'd probably say Michigan probably does, maybe by a little bit, because you had to replace the entire offense and practically a lot of defense.
Sure, we have
too.
one of the youngest teams in the country, don't
That's
we?
what I thought. I thought Ohio State was pretty young. I mean, we know Stroud's young, and so is this like
Almost
Michigan's
our whole
last
team.
chance, like to really have competitive for another year or two if they're going to turn over most people? Okay.
But Buckeyes are playing a lot better than I thought. You know, anyone I think thought they would at this point. I mean, I don't think anyone's surprised that they are like one loss about to go into the playoffs, but the way they're doing it right now, Stroud is on point. Yeah. I mean, that dude is on point. He's playing some amazing quarterbacking. And I know everyone's going to say, well, he plays for Ohio State. He has a ton of time to throw. There's at least 3 receivers on every play going like this. Hey, I'm open.
Well, he also has 9 games under his belt now that he didn't have against Oregon. Yeah. So he's got the little bit more experience.
Yeah, I mean, but he's still playing like rock.
Yeah, and he's great.
Quarterback. Yeah. He's young, and he's still playing that good. So again, for Michigan to have a chance this weekend, I think Ohio State, a couple of things are going to have to happen. Ohio State will have to come in a little overconfident, maybe allow an ugly game, and Michigan's going to have to play lights out like they never have. So those are the things that are going to have to happen, and we're going to see if Ryan Day allows that to happen.
Well, essentially, there's really only 2 keys to the game. So number 1, Ryan Day gets off
better
the bus
coach than Harbaugh. He's better coach than Harbaugh.
And he declares prima nocta. Number 2, Michigan has to not call the game due to COVID like they did last year. And that's it. Those 2 things happen, and then it's.
He's going to call.
Ryan Day has not forgotten that, by the way.
No, that's BS.
That
was
almost
so
cost them. That's why I guarantee he will not hold anything back against Michigan. That's if anything has to worry you a little bit extra.
Plus, he might not call prima nocta, but he's going to call prima doctra and take the doctors right away from him.
Hey, that's okay. If they can do it, they should. Excuse me. But I think that it's going to be a great weekend. So one last thing, I want to talk about two very short last things. Like as far as the rankings coming up, where do you guys feel like what do you think they're going to be? And feel free to look at your phones because I'm going to, because I need to actually pull this up.
Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, UC in that order.
UC.
Actually, no. Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, UC. In that order.
Think Ohio State will jump Bama?
I do.
Interesting. Matt,
yeah,
what do you think?
I do. Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
I think it's going to be Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, UC.
Really? I mean, it doesn't matter. They got to play each other. It's the end rankings, but it's still kind of fun to predict. Brian, what do you think?
I'm with Jason. I think that's exactly how it's going to go. I think they'll keep Michigan at 5. And either way, it doesn't matter. I mean, the only thing that really matters is at this point, it honestly, this season couldn't have gone better for a team like UC, right? I mean, everything that UC needed to be the first group of 5 in has happened. And they had to have Oklahoma lose. They had to have Oregon lose. They both lost badly back to back. You know, you can pretty much take out the ACC. You can pretty much take out the Pac-12 at this point. The Big 12 has half a shot, maybe with Oklahoma State, but they've got to, you know, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State likely have to play each other two times. So, you know, the chances of now the team is kind of lurking out there. Obviously, we've got Bama and Georgia that have to play each other. We know that. And we've got Ohio State and Michigan that have to play each other. So only, you know, if Georgia obviously beats Bama, you got a 2-loss Bama that would still, I think, at least be in the mix for the 4th spot. But that's tough to put in a 2-loss team. You know, UC's sitting pretty. They really are. They just got to beat Houston, and they should be in this thing. So
smoking SMU helped a little bit this past weekend.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, you know what? Like they played like crap against Tulsa.
Yep. Played like crap against like South Florida.
And moved up. So you know, it doesn't matter. They just don't lose. Just don't lose to Houston, and you're in. And it's just a matter of who's number 4.
But the committee wants Notre Dame to get in there so damn bad. They really do. They're looking for any opportunity to switch Notre Dame in.
Well, you can tell.
As long as Bama's out, I don't care.
Well, you can tell.
Because Notre Dame's going to get beat. That's what you guys are all missing. So logically, that's why Ohio State should be 2 and Alabama should be 3. But it's going to be harder for the committee to justify putting Alabama at 4 if they're already number 3 now before they lose to Georgia. If they're number 2 when they lose to Georgia, then it's going to be easier to rationalize putting them at number 4.
I can, and the thing I've said steadfastly is that there's no way if Georgia gets better. If one of those 2 SEC teams gets back in after the SEC championship game, they're not going to want them playing 2 games in a row. They're just not. That's not going to happen. So one of them is going to end up being 3. You know, one will be 1, one will be 3 if that's the way they're going to do it. So, you know, Matt may have a point. They want them 1 and 2. And if it's a close game, you can already hear the narrative of how that crap's going to go. But either way, I think it's, you know, the Big Ten champ, the Big Ten, whoever wins this game this week is the other team that's in this thing. Because I don't think whoever comes out of the West, I don't care, Wisconsin, whoever, they're not going to beat whoever comes out of the East.
Right.
So the Big East champ is going to be in this thing. And I think UC, as long as they don't lose to Houston, they're going to be in.
I have to take exception with one thing. If Michigan beat Ohio State, I think it would be very hard for them to go beat Wisconsin because they've already played a game. And I know that's a really hilarious theoretical because you've got to think about Ohio State losing this weekend. I don't know if you guys can fathom that or wrap your brains around such a thing.
Nope.
And I can't either, actually. But I don't think Michigan would beat. That would be a tough game for them to beat
against Wisconsin. I think
they already beat them.
They're playing way better now than when they played Wisconsin the first time.
Hard to beat.
You poor Michigan fans have so much post-traumatic stress. Like I feel so badly for you guys. Like have confidence. Who is Wisconsin beating?
How do you?
Like Nebraska. Look, I will say this.
Playing well now, though.
Can we say though? Can we
playing crappy Big Ten teams?
Can we officially say though, Nebraska is a sneaky decent team that's like the best 8-loss team ever? Dude,
we're not playing that game. No, we're not saying 8-loss team is good. They're not. They've got 8 losses.
I saw this today.
No,
Nebraska has 8 losses, right?
That's a lot.
They have scored more points than their opponents in conference play.
And they have 8 losses. So how many points have they given up?
Okay, one thing
they've outscored their opponents and they have 8 losses. That's how competitive they've been.
We'll give them a shiny little participation rim at the end of the Big Ten season for those guys.
Wisconsin and they gave up a return.
Now.
Well, yeah, but it was only Nebraska loses games the way Nebraska loses games. Like it's
they suck. I'm sorry, they suck. They suck.
Dude, they played Michigan tough. They played Michigan State tough. They played Wisconsin tough. They played Ohio State tough. They played.
And I'm sure their moms called them after the game and told them they're proud of them for trying hard and patted them on the butt.
I'll tell you this. I told my wife after we went to the UC Tulsa game, and I told her without any question the next week when I watched the Ohio State barely beat Nebraska that same weekend. And I told her, I thought if UC went to Nebraska, they would lose. And I stand by that. I think Nebraska would beat UC in Nebraska.
You've fallen
So-
the hype of Nebraska being a good team in 8 losses.
I'm just
bro.
telling you, the conference as a whole is
It's not
better than
good.
people give it respect for.
No.
But the top end teams were overrated, and we all knew this. We knew that I think Michigan's overrated. I actually think Ohio State to some degree has been overrated most of the year.
So your message is the good team in the Ohio in Big Ten aren't very good, and the bad teams are actually good.
Are better than people give them credit for. Like Wisconsin, they wrote them off early in the season. They're actually playing really well right now. And then look at a team like Penn State. Like nobody's going to give Penn State
Well,
credit.
The
That's a
back
good
end of the
football
Big
team.
Ten is going to be better.
Yeah.
As I knock my microphone over, the back end of a lesser conference like the ACC or something. It's just because they're deeper, but I don't buy that they're good teams though.
Hey, they're better than teams like Texas and Florida.
But Weaver, you're way smarter at football than I am, and I hear what you're saying, but I still can't buy that Nebraska's good with 8 losses because they've got 8 losses.
No, I didn't say they're good. I'm not trying to make that argument. What I am trying to make the argument is they're competitive. And so I think you can gauge a lot by games against common opponents and games, both Ohio State and Michigan struggled with Nebraska. Both Ohio State and Michigan struggled with Penn State. Both of them came ahead. Michigan State, completely different ball game. And if anything, that's starting to tell you, it doesn't necessarily tell me that Ohio State's going to go in and blow the doors off Michigan. But I do think that they're peak. They're starting to really peak, which is really terrifying.
Yeah.
Because they're way more talented than anybody in that
But
conference.
those last 2 weeks have been crazy with their offense. Crazy. I just the steamroller's going. It's just snowball rolling downhill right now.
So I think I saw the line was opening at 6.5. Nate, how you feeling about that?
Is it? I haven't even looked at the line. I was gonna actually, ask you guys like what you think your final game scores were, but 6.5. I think I'm actually shocked that it's
Let's
that low.
do it. Let's go around.
I'm shocked. It's 6 points. That's it.
I thought the line. I could be wrong because I don't bet, but I thought that I saw earlier in the day that the line was 6.5.
Yeah.
So the line was 20 against Michigan State, and granted, Ohio State was at home.
Wow.
But
And I would have laid it. I would have laid it because I felt like that was just a horrible matchup for Michigan State. They were colossally overrated. Tucker just got that extension. They were coming in with a really bad pass defense and banged up. The one thing that Michigan State could do early is they were rushing the passer, but their defensive ends were hurt. And so that was the problem with that team that was coming in. It was like bringing a knife to a gunfight. And that's sort of the thing with Michigan. I think Michigan is clearly the best team that Ohio State has played yet in conference. I think I see them as very similar to Penn State. I think they're very, very similar. And when Clifford's healthy, and Clifford's been hurt, that offensive line for Penn State's been dreadful all year.
And
no
running game.
Michigan, no running game at all. Michigan can run the ball, and I think they've settled into a nice rhythm. And so that's the thing that's always made me nervous about this game with Michigan is if they can muddy it up, ugly it up, and make it a game where they're dictating the tone and the pace of the game, Michigan's got a shot.
Yeah, and I think
Blake
that
Corum healthy? Is he going to be back?
he is going to be. He could have played this week, but it was only in an emergency situation. I don't know if you guys saw the game against Maryland, but our freshman Donovan Edwards broke the single game record for running back receiving yards. He had 170 receiving yards and a touchdown. So
as our friend Diego
is
says,
happening
Nate,
now.
the defensive backs are on their 6th-string defensive backs in Maryland. That's his excuse, at least.
Yeah,
Diego.
well, but our receivers didn't do great against Maryland.
Yeah,
Our
running
receivers
backs.
haven't been great all year.
Except for the Michigan State game. Because McNamara went off in that
true.
game. I mean, I was really blown away. Like that dude, the thing about him, I really like that he seems to be excellent at the short to intermediate throws. I don't like his deep ball throwing at all, but his intermediate throws are really good. He makes really good decisions. And the one thing I didn't like, I actually thought the quarterback rotation bit him in the ass. Like not only because of the turnovers, but I just don't understand. Like you got a guy who's balling in a game. Like don't mess with the momentum. Like that kid was
Don't
playing
take
the
out
best
the
game of
hot
his
hand.
career.
Don't take out the hot hand.
And
I
they
think
did.
he was
They did
hurt
him.
though when they brought the backup in when he fumbled. I think it was because he got hurt. Wasn't McNamara hurt at that point?
I
Is that
don't
what-
think so. I think they were trying to bring him in
Yeah,
for that kind of
they
read
do
option
that.
game stuff that they do because they run more. And I get it. McCarthy threw the one touchdown, but I just thought McNamara was just playing at a higher level. But
Yeah.
the one thing I don't, if you get in a game again with Michigan where they've got to throw the ball and they've got to push the ball downfield, it's lights out. Like it's game over.
Yeah.
Because Ohio State's that's the game. If Ohio State gets up, especially early in that game, I think it's going to be pretty ugly.
Yeah, we got to keep that.
Oh, for sure.
They got to dictate terms
Yeah.
from the jump.
Well,
Yeah,
Michigan
very
doesn't have a
true.
quick score offense either, do they? You guys are telling me it's a little bit more grinding. So they get back a couple touchdowns. It's going to be hard for them to catch up.
Well, and that's what Harbaugh wants. That's his offense. It's a grinding offense.
Yeah.
You know what? When he first came into the league, I'll never forget this because Urban Meyer said he's never seen a team more dedicated to the 10-yard goal. Like go just a play that will get you 10 yards. He said he'd never seen a team that dedicated to just get 10 yards and that's it. And so that's just how he wants to do it. He wants to eat the clock, which is what you got to do against someone like CJ.
You got to keep the ball out of the offense's hand,
Yeah.
man. That's the only way you're going to stop Ohio State right now. They're scoring at will.
They're happy to on first down get 4 yards on a run.
Yeah.
Thrilled. They're thrilled if they can get 4 yards on first down.
Nate, does it
Well,
bother
it's
you
so
that
funny
Ohio?
to-
Go ahead.
No, the one thing I would say about Michigan's offense though is I do like Josh Gaddis a lot. Like Josh Gaddis is a Joe Moorhead guy. You know, he coached with Joe Moorhead at Penn State. Moorhead was the offensive coordinator at Oregon that just took a blowtorch to Ohio State's defense. Now, granted, different defense, different scheme, different guy calling it, but Joe Moorhead, and granted, same Joe Moorhead who coordinated the game against Utah. You know, not all games are the same, but I really, really like Josh Gaddis was at Alabama. And I'm not saying necessarily that means you're God's gift to coaching, but like he knows how to coach. Like they're going to have some things schemed up in this game. And it's not like Michigan can't throw the ball. You know, they can. And if you're not disciplined, they're going to beat you with the RPO game. They're going to beat you with a lot of action stuff, especially with the tight end stuff. And if I'm going up against Ohio State, I want to put those linebackers and safety in coverage responsibilities because they haven't been good. They haven't been great all year with that stuff, you know, but I think it's all about like consistently, can you stand toe to toe with Ohio State in the trenches? And if you can do that, there have been games when Michigan's done that to Ohio State. You know, this isn't something new that all of a sudden they're not as talented as Ohio State. They know that every year since Urban Meyer got there, they're not going to be as talented, but they've played them tough in games. They've games when they should have won.
Yeah,
but
there's been high scoring games.
Yeah. The one thing that concerns me about Michigan is like they don't seem to have that like I'm gonna put my
They don't believe in themselves. They don't believe in themselves when it comes up against Ohio State under pressure.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I'm okay if Harbaugh goes is because he's got that NFL mentality where, oh, hey, I've got a 10-point lead. I'm just going to run the ball. I'm going to run out the clock. That
or
works.
Fourth and three at the 20. We're gonna kick a field goal here and take the points. Ryan Day's going for it. Like unless they're going up 2 scores or something, Ryan Day's going for that. Lane Kiffin's going for that. Lincoln Riley's going for that. Like you look at the way college football is adapting. Why are offenses doing all this? Because guys are going for it on 4th and short. In anything in plus territory, they're going for it. Like they're aggressive, and I love it. Like let's go. Let's freaking ball. You got a good offense. Have faith in them. Let's do it. So if you don't play, you don't play at that level of aggression. Like man, there is no tomorrow. Like we're going to try to knock them out.
I would bet this game coming up, we're probably not going to see much conservative plays for Harbaugh. I think that this one is just kind of like this might honestly, and I've said this, and I wouldn't be surprised that he's interviewing for an NFL job. I know there's rumors out there that he kind of wants out. I don't think if he loses, he's going to still be able to say, look what I did. I brought this team back from 2-6 last year. I mean, they're doing great. Like he's going to have NFL offers this coming up.
Not enough at this point at Michigan. They're not going to fire him. If he loses to Michigan State, he loses to Ohio State, they're not going to fire him.
Oh, yeah.
True.
And you know what? When he lost to Michigan State, he now has a losing record overall against Michigan State.
And Ohio
he's like
State
3-4.
So
you can't do that.
So Michigan's okay with losing their 2 biggest regular season games of the year.
No. And they're not.
That's-
And that's the
that's
thing.
what
Then why would they
That's what
keep
they're saying.
Harbaugh then? That's the message.
Rich Rod got fired.
Actions speak
Coach
louder than
got
words.
fired.
They've kept
Who
Harbaugh.
else are they going to hire?
I don't know.
Somebody.
Else that can lose. Nate, question for you. Does it bother you that the last 3 real head coaches of Ohio State have all won national championships?
Yes. I can say that that's bothered
I mean, it's a pretty amazing run.
What's your
isn't it?
point?
No, I mean, that's crazy. The last 3 coaches
Hey.
that the school has have all won national championships.
And Ryan Day's played in one last year.
Yeah.
Like you talked about experience, like, Michigan's got experience playing against Ohio State. A lot of dudes that are on this roster and all of these coaches have experience playing against Clemson and Alabama.
Yeah.
Like they
Mhm.
played against the highest of the high. They're not judging themselves against Michigan anymore. They're judging
No,
themselves
definitely
against
not.
Alabama. That's
No.
where you have to be in today's game.
And agree. This is the game, traditionally speaking, but it's not really anymore. I mean, like it would be like Ohio State's disappointed if they beat Ohio State or Michigan in a year and then go lose in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
That's a disappointing year.
Yeah.
And so maybe what we can do after this game coming up, maybe we can all get back together and we can talk about the future of Ohio State as far as this goes, whatever happens. But I definitely want, I think we should all 4 of us get back together maybe on next Sunday or
Okay.
Monday, and
Yeah, I'm
we'll
down.
talk about what just happened. Hopefully I'm the one smiling.
It's
You
gonna be
promise
up.
to pick up the phone after next week.
I know I might be raking or something, I mean, it might, the leaves might fall.
You might want to
Yeah,
ask some of your
let's-
neighbors if
let's-
they need your yards raked, Nate.
Someone give me
let's
smelling
get
salts.
let's get our game picks and head on out. What is your prediction for the big game?
Guests go first. One of you
Brian,
two
I
guess.
defer to you. You're the most knowledgeable.
Hey, if the spread stayed at 6.5, I would definitely lay the points. I think Ohio State will beat them by 10. I mean, I just think at least. I mean, it's one of those games. I could see it getting ugly and being one of those games like Penn State or Nebraska because it's on the road. It's a tough
Mhm.
opponent. You just got to get out with a win. But I think there's an extra chip on Ryan Day's shoulder right now. I think he's still pissed off about last year, and I think he's tired of hearing. I think a lot of those dudes in that program are tired of hearing the chirping coming from Michigan, and good for Michigan. Look, a lot of people were saying that Michigan was going to lose 4 or 5 games this year. I mean, they have had a good year, but damn it, they should have beaten Michigan State. Like, damn it, you
Yeah.
should have beaten Michigan State. And that's one of those things. I do think there's just a level of commitment that's not there. Because if Ohio State were consistently losing to Penn State and Michigan on a yearly basis, that coach isn't going to be around. They're
Well,
just
it's not even just
So-
losing to Michigan. You're losing to Penn State, Wisconsin, and
Mhm.
Michigan State.
Yeah.
I mean, don't
Yeah.
think about beating Ohio State if you can't beat
Yeah.
Michigan
Right.
State.
Right.
Yep.
So that's
And
kind
that's-
of where fans are right now, and why we're
Yeah.
so irritated, and we're counting. Oh, hey, we're going to beat Ohio State once per decade. Call
Well,
me
I hate
excited.
to say, Nate, I don't think it's going to be this year. And that's the scary thing is there were a
Sorry.
couple of these glimpses of hope where I think Michigan's a really good team. And I think there is a formula to win this game. But everything has to go right for Michigan to do it. And I think Ohio State's just got too much going for it, and they're peaking at the wrong time for Michigan. And so, I'm not saying it's going to be a complete blowout, but it wouldn't shock me if it turned into that. I wouldn't call for that. I think Michigan can keep this thing close because I think this is the best opponent that they've played roster wise since they played Oregon. And I think they have a better quarterback than Oregon does. I just don't think they can duplicate what Oregon did.
All right, Jason. Oh, hey, score.
Go
Score.
ahead.
We need a score.
God, I haven't even looked at that. I mean, Michigan should score. I don't know. Let's go 38-24.
38-24. All right.
Does
It's
it,
recording.
Matt's aware this is like a visual medium?
Actually, this is an improvement, Jason. What are you talking
It
about?
really is.
Yeah.
It really is. Like, there he is. He's back. All right.
I didn't even get up.
Back.
I'm empty, and I didn't even get up.
Did you
I'm
just go to the bathroom? I didn't know he could do that in these.
I was gonna say, I have dog. I'm playing with
You
my
guys hold on a
dogs. I'm-
second.
I'm-
You gotta
I'm
turn. You
playing
gotta
with
turn
my
off
dogs.
your. You gotta turn off your camera when you do that.
but-
That's the broadcasting. All right. For me, I'm going to be very brief. I'm not going to give a lot of analysis. I think mentally, Michigan's been
God.
afraid of Ohio State. I think what we're going to see is 45-21.
Oh,
Oh,
is that a Gap hat? I can't read it from here.
It's Nike. This was a birthday present from my son, who's a freshman at Ohio State.
Yeah, you're obligated to at least root for this game.
Yep.
What's your score again? I didn't hear that. Sorry.
45-21.
Oh, wow. I'm going to need
big
smelling
time,
salts if Jason's right about that.
I think they get boat raced right out of the gates pretty early.
I'll be turning it off at halftime if it's 45-21.
Yep, just like your wife.
that's when you can. No, you got to stay. You got to stay to the fourth quarter, Nate, so you can hear OHIO and stay.
Yeah,
Great.
that's what I want to hear. Matt, you're up. Score prediction.
Well, I think we are going to have a similar outcome to when we played a ranked team in 2014. There was a heavy running team that didn't have anything else, and we beat them 59-0. I think it won't be quite that bad. I'm guessing 52-0.
Oh, I love it.
52-0.
Oh,
Can you dig it?
Wisconsin tears, man. I love it.
That's just weak. He doesn't even believe that prediction.
Matt's gonna have some beer bottles on his fingers because he's gonna be like,
There you go.
he's gonna be Wolverines
Wolverines come out to play.
All right.
I knew that you could, Jason. I knew that you could.
So, okay, I think I'm up. So normally I pick Michigan by default. I mean, in the past, I've been like, all right, I'm just going to pick Michigan. And if Matt or Jason or someone says, hey, let's make a bet, an embarrassing bet, I'd be like, I'm all in. But I'm just not that way anymore. Like I said, we're winning one game per decade. Michigan's at show me at this point. Like, I'm not going to pick them to win until they actually do it. I've actually got to see the score of them winning and the word final, like right next to it, before I'm going to say, hey, maybe I'll start picking Michigan again. But so a wise man once said, there are two kinds of people in this world. And what is it? I just screwed up the quote. There are two kinds of people in this world.
Fool me once.
Those with loaded guns and those who dig. And I think Michigan digs. Does anyone even know what that quote was from?
You butchered it.
Cool
I
hand
actually
Luke.
quit paying
What is that
attention.
from?
I did. Good, the bad, and
It
the
sounds
ugly.
like okay.
Yeah,
All right.
Once
Only
you jacked
Jason
it up,
knew what it
my
was.
mind actually stopped, and I was thinking about other quotes I actually like. So.
Maybe I'll have to edit that part out. That's the best part about the editing on this. You can just edit that part right out. But yeah, I'm going to say, because I want this to happen, 28-24 Ohio State.
28-24 Ohio State.
Yep.
Close one.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, that could happen, very easily happen, more so than the blowouts.
All I want is what Nebraska and Penn State did. That's all I want at this point. It's already a successful season for Michigan based on the expectations in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So I would like to be competitive at this point. Granted, I'd take a win, but I mean, I would much rather be competitive at this point. That's all I'm going to predict.
If I am
Fair
ever,
enough.
as a fan who wants close losses, just shoot me.
You don't like
Yeah.
you don't like just because it's so attainable, but they don't
Well,
get it.
but I mean, Matt, in honesty, though, I'm not trying to pile on to Michigan fans. I mean, wasn't that kind of what we were hoping for against Alabama last year? I mean, I think that when Ohio State went into that national championship game, we all knew they were really good on offense. It might have been the best offense Ohio State's ever had. But the defense was super suspect, and we had two of our best players down with COVID. And it was just like, we knew that was a historically good Alabama offense. And I think I think you have to at least acknowledge that if you were super confident going into that Alabama game, you were fooling yourself. And I'm not saying that you go into it with that attitude, but I can see where you're coming from, Nate. I mean, it's tough. You know that you're kind of outmanned, but I think there are some real reasons for optimism this year that you can be competitive. And there really is a blueprint that they can at least hang. I mean, this team's they would have gotten beaten so badly last year if they hadn't, effectively, thrown in the COVID card. It would have been ridiculous. They've been playing their third or fourth string quarterback. It would have been ridiculous.
Yep.
Like, they wouldn't even had a chance. Yeah, this year they've at least got a decent team with a decent identity. They know what they can do. And if they can't dictate the terms, they know they're going to get blown out. But if they can keep it close. And so, and maybe there's some wrinkles they can throw at them. Maybe they get some luck their way, get a couple, either turnover or something like that. And we'll see. I don't come into this game feeling nearly like I did against Michigan State, where I knew they were just going to destroy Michigan State. This one is like, okay, you're in for a heavyweight fight. You better be ready. If you don't match Michigan's, the physical tone they're going to bring, you can get beat. So, this should be a really good game. I'm looking forward to it. So, I'm not going to pile on. I'm really not. I don't think that's. I think you have more issues losing the Michigan State game. That's the one where, like, you had that game, you absolutely should have won it. But by the same token, they could have lost the Penn State game, and they figured out how to win that.
That's not a team that does. Michigan's not a team the last couple of years that would have figured out how to win that game against Penn State, and this year they are.
Yeah, and now they were the better team. They should have won it. Mm-hmm. But you're right. I mean, there's the part of that's that. I think it's the experience of learning how to win those games, the mentality that you should win those games, and then figuring out how to win those games. And they, early in the season, they were letting teams like Rutgers get back in games. That's where people were like, "Oh, Michigan's not that good," because they had a bad second half, and that's something that Ohio State has that. But Ohio State's developed that over time, and I think even with these younger dudes, they've got it. So if they can match that and figure out a way, if they get up on Ohio State, they can figure out a way to seal the deal. They can win. There's a reason that when they, the projections all have this is like a what is it, like 60%, 58, 62% win for Ohio State. Like, it's not a gimme. It's not a gimme.
Aren't most of the kids on Ohio State's team right now maybe have only been alive for one or two losses against Michigan at this point? No, I'm serious.
Yeah, they haven't.
I mean, that's crazy.
My son is 16 and he's only experienced one win.
Right. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's worse than John Cooper ever could imagine.
Yeah.
Well,
this is what would happen if they'd have kept John Cooper.
Look, and that's why, when Kirby Smart embarrassed Dan Mullen by coming out and saying that recruiting is the lifeblood of your program, and that's why, you better be recruiting all the time. There is no time for football. It's always recruiting time. And that's what Urban Meyer brought to this program. Was like, Ohio State was already a good program, solid blue blood program, but now they're a national recruiter. And they, with the exception of the occasional kid who goes to Notre Dame, they get everybody they want in state, and then they go out nationally and they recruit. And now the one position, the thing that should terrify everybody who's not an Ohio State fan is that Ohio State's never been a quarterback factory.
Right.
And now Ryan Day is getting the best quarterbacks, any quarterback he basically wants. And even when quarterbacks transfer out, they're still going to be loaded. They just came back, and this kid, Stroud's going to end up obliterating the record books. After Justin Fields came in and transferred and did it. After Dwayne Haskins had 1 year in this offense and did it. Now it's really, really frightening what they can do because of that position. And that's the one thing that, like, Michigan used to do that on the regular, was put pro quarterbacks in the league. They're not doing that anymore, and they're not recruiting at the highest level. And as you say, Nate, when they get these high level recruits, they're not turning into stars. They're just not. Some guys are. It's not like they don't have any stars, but most of the guys that are not necessarily the 5-star kid.
None of the 5-stars are doing that. Ojabo and Hutchinson were low 4-stars.
Brady Hoke at least could recruit well.
In Ohio, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He got a lot more leash than Harbaugh. He got a lot less leash than Harbaugh.
You remember Shane Morris?
Yep. Who was the quarterback that Michigan
had? You remember Derek
that,
Green?
Well, who's the Michigan quarterback that played for the Yankees and came back and played another year or two?
Drew Henson.
Drew Henson.
Yep.
Yeah.
The last time I was at the Ohio State game, the last time Michigan beat Ohio State at Ohio State, it was the year 2000, and that was the last time. Drew Henson. I see that on TV, and I think, my gosh, we didn't have high definition.
Oh, I can't watch those old
picture is
games.
terrible.
Terrible.
We were
That's
in our
the last time
20s.
Nate,
We
Michigan
were
you're
in
won.
watching
our
a Pac-12
20s.
game on ESPN. It's that bad.
We were in our 20s when that happened. We were in our
Yeah.
20s.
That's so gross. I was there.
It's so gross. That's so gross.
You're getting the rebroadcast of the Pac-12 games. How bad is that when ESPN's getting called out because they're sending 20-year-old cameras to the Pac-12? Like, your football's so crappy out there. We're going to send the worst broadcasting team and, like, you know.
We're going to record it on Zoom.
We can only
and
do
send it back.
480p.
It's terrible.
All right,
So
guys.
bad.
Well, let's wrap it up. Thanks a lot for joining. We're all obligated to come back a week from now.
Do I get to pitch?
Talk about the. Are you going to pitch?
I mean, are you going to let me at least, pitch my
He's gonna
market
pitch
my
his
shit?
show.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean,
Let's do
come
it. Let's
on.
hear
What
it.
kind of host is it? Thanks, Nate. All right, guys. I'm co-host of everybody who's watching us YouTube right now, the All Things Blues and Southern Rock podcast. If you're into rock music, Southern rock, blues, listen. We've had guys on from the Black Crowes. Most recently, Charlie Stars, the lead singer and guitar player from Blackberry Smoke. Check us out where all podcasts can be found. And thanks for having me. It was fun. It's good talking to you guys.
You guys have a really good podcast. And are you guys going to do YouTube ever?
We did a Halloween special with Daisy Dead from the Dead Deads and Boone Froggatt from the band Otis, and that is
You
now
wanna see
available
his
on YouTube
face?
to watch. What's that?
So you want to
You
see
wanna
his
see-
face on the
You
radio?
don't want to see
I
my
invited
face.
him here.
We were wearing costumes. I had my mullet wig on and my jean jacket with all my heavy
There you
metal
go.
patches. So I made sure I hid a little bit of this.
Nice.
But thanks for having me on, Nate. It was a lot of fun. It's
Well,
good
you
talking
know
to you
what?
guys
Absolutely.
again.
Jason, you can use that for next year when Quinn Ewers is starting for Ohio State. You can break that out again.
Yeah. If he's starting for
2 years.
Ohio State.
2
If
years.
he's starting
2 years.
for
2
Ohio
years.
State.
We'll get 2 years
think,
out of Stroud.
I don't think CJ Stroud's going anywhere.
Yeah. Like I said, I tell people that all the time when they start worrying about the transfer rumors and all. It's like, hey, the only thing we're guaranteed is whoever's starting for Ohio State is going to be a stud. And there's no reason to think that won't have a stud quarterback every year in perpetuity right now. So I'm not overly worried.
If it was Quinn Ewers doing what CJ Stroud is doing now, everyone would be thrilled, right?
I don't care what the name of the on the back of the jersey is. If we're getting
I mean,
this
what
kind
he's
of
doing
production,
now,
it doesn't
what's
matter.
Quinn Ewers going to do better than CJ Stroud is doing now? I can't imagine any quarterback coming in doing better.
The crazy thing right now is that you got all these kids that are leaving after, like, if you get 2 years out of a starter in college, that's a long time. It's crazy. Like, if Stroud puts up numbers for 2 years, he's going to end up being a top 15 draft pick. Is he coming back for a fourth year? It's crazy. Like these, Spencer Rattler, everybody was talking about him before the season started as a potential number 1 pick. The dude's not even starting on his team right now. That's how, like, crazy. Even in a bad quarterback year, they're talking about 4 or 5 quarterbacks will go again in the first.
Yeah.
So, a lot of these guys just don't stick around very long. So that's Ryan Day has talked about that a lot, that he gets these highly productive guys because the system's productive and he knows what he's looking for in these quarterbacks. It's a good fit. You got good skill position, all that stuff. They got this big offense and people just don't hang around. I think Justin Fields would have benefited tremendously by staying another year. Dwayne Haskins certainly would have benefited by staying another year. But you just don't get it. If you're going to go in first round in the NFL, you got to go.
Some dudes
man.
don't come
Why
there to
not?
play school, Brian. They just don't
I
come to
get
play
it.
school.
Hey, look,
So
look at Quinn Ewers, right? Quinn Ewers is he's basically a 17-year-old kid, right? I think he's 17. He should be
Already
a
a
senior in
millionaire.
high school. But the problem is that the state of Texas wouldn't let him cash in on the NIL at all. So he has a choice to make. I mean, he made a decision for himself and his family to go ahead and take those endorsement deals and come to Ohio State as a kid who shouldn't even be on a college campus.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if the kid gets homesick and wants to go back or just, is struggling with that transition, who the hell wouldn't? He was going to be the big man on campus. He was going to be the best high school quarterback in the country.
Would you call him Doogie Howser QB?
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. And it's good. But I've been thinking about that a lot. So, I wouldn't blame the kid if he makes that decision to go back. But at the same time, we've all had those transitions in our life that were difficult, either moving or, when you first got to college or, so it's tough. I mean, I hope he sticks it out, obviously selfishly, but I also think it'd be a good spot for any of these kids. you want to learn from good mentors, and whether you end up leaving and playing elsewhere or you end up sticking it out. I think there's a lot of examples of guys like, Mac Jones at Alabama stuck around, even though Tua and Jalen Hurts were there. Kyle Trask stuck around in Florida. There are guys who have waited their turn, but there are other guys who left, like Joe Burrow and Kyler Murray, and so it's not a one size fits all thing. There's only so many. As I told my son, who was playing tackle football for the first time this year, he wanted to play quarterback, and he was one of 4 quarterbacks on their team. And it was like, hey, only 1 quarterback can play at a time. But if you play another position, there's 3 wide receivers, there's 2 tackles, there's so it doesn't matter where you go. It may not be the exact fit that you want. So it's going to be interesting. But the one thing that as a selfish fan, you want depth in that room. And that's the thing that's crazy is they've got, multiple 5 stars in that room, a couple 4 stars. It's like, it's not like the old days where you were, rolling out Steve Belisari. So when Michigan's
Zwick.
got, those guys that, so now I think that's the thing with the future's bright, and they're recruiting at a level that's kind of unprecedented, and they're the only team in the North that's really recruiting on that level. And I think any team, Michigan included, that's going to compete with them on a regular basis has to make a commitment to recruiting. So whether it's Harbaugh, whether it's somebody else, like that's got to be job and priority one. How do you get a ton of better dudes in this program?
And that's going to be by winning. They're going to need to win. Unfortunately, if you don't win, the recruits go elsewhere. They go to the winning team.
Mm-hmm.
What you were saying, though, about the transferring thing, I think that transferring is not necessarily as big of an issue now because he's getting paid $1 million to sit on the bench. There's not like an urgent need for him to start right away when he's already getting his $1 million.
Depends on depends on his mindset.
That's true. And that's what I think. I don't necessarily, and I don't want to take this too far off that topic, but the thing with winning's important, but I think that they all have a goal. Most of these guys that are playing at this level have a goal of playing professionally.
Mm-hmm.
And so they want professional development, and they're going to do that wherever they think they got the best opportunities to do that. Now, early in your career, I think the best thing you can do in general is to learn from the best coaches. And you may not necessarily get a lot of playing time, but it's all those things that help to develop you that we don't always see, that put you in position, whether you stick with a program and maybe you have to wait a couple years to play, or you're going to transfer out and play somewhere else. That I think all those guys are going to have success, and that's what continues. I think what really is more important than even winning is consistently putting guys at that position in the pros. Because if you got a record, even though Joe Burrow is not necessarily a Buckeye, he didn't win a national championship for the Buckeyes. He was a Buckeye. He came through that program and learned a lot from Ryan Day. And when you start putting dudes in the first round consistently, like Lincoln Riley's going to have his pick of quarterbacks because he's had 3 Heisman Trophy winners and 3 dudes that have gone in the first round. Like he's
already got the number 1 quarterback for, I think, 2023, 2024.
How many national championships has Lincoln Riley won?
Yeah.
None. So that's the thing. Like if you're consistently putting out offensive tackles, like running backs and offensive linemen go to Wisconsin, go to Iowa, because those dudes put them in the pros. They're not winning national championships, but they're consistently putting those dudes in the pros. The key though is to be able to do that on multiple units and be able to do that, and put it all together and have enough depth to go up against the teams that are recruiting like that. So
that's true. Well, I hope Quinn Ewers is the next Tate Martell. That's all I can say.
Oh man,
that's what I hope for that young man. That's what I'm hoping for.
I will say, did you happen to watch there was quite a drop off from Stroud to McCord, against Michigan State. So I hope for Ohio State's sake that Stroud stays, healthy and stays as long as he wants to.
Yeah, the drop off. All right, guys. Well, let's wrap it up from there. We'll talk about that, and I think maybe on the next segment next week, maybe we can pick this conversation back up about the quarterbacks at Ohio State, because it's really fascinating how that's operating. So definitely want to talk about that. And anyway, go blue.
Go Bucks.
OH.
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 Oh, you see.
Talk to you next time.